Hello. I'm very pleased to speak and I'm very honoured to speak with a special guest today, Dr. Jillian Spencer. Now, some of you may remember back in 2023, I also spoke with Jillian about some of the issues that she was having up in Queensland, and I've worked with Jillian on a number of things since. But I thought it was a really good time to talk with Jillian about what's been going on up in Queensland and with this federal review and stuff like that. But firstly, hi, Jillian. How's it going?
Hello, David. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's wonderful to talk with you again. So firstly, for people that might not know you, would you mind just maybe introducing yourself and your background and what's led you to what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. So what that means is I studied medicine at Monash in Melbourne, and then I came up to Queensland to Brisbane for my internship, and then worked for a couple of years in the hospital, and then trained in psychiatry, which takes about 5 years, and qualified as a psychiatrist in 2009, and completed subspecialty certificates in child and adolescent psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. And then I was working at the Queensland Children's Hospital from 2014, and we got a gender clinic operating from about 2017. And then following that, we just, I slowly figured out the model in the gender clinic and was a bit surprised. And then we saw this massive uptick in teenagers presenting with gender distress, and I saw them going through the gender clinic and being put on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And I could see that some of these adolescents, or most of them actually, were incredibly troubled, and it just didn't feel right for them to medicalise, given the complexity of the difficulties. And in psychiatry, we work on the concept of formulation, which is trying to understand the underlying reasons why someone might be, for example, just feeling discomfort with their body. But this gender medicine approach is to just assume that the child is trans or naturally diverse. And so it was quite jarring, and I got quite concerned, raised difficulties and raised concerns in my workplace, and then eventually was stood down because of it. And so, so I've been stood down since April 2023, so 21 months.
That's a long time. And you and I also appeared in a documentary back in 2023 talking about this issue. It was on Channel 7 Spotlight. You can still watch it on YouTube if you're interested in hearing more. But suffice to say that you've been someone who's very outspoken about these issues and this form of medicine and the potential harms. And I think we spoke about it earlier off camera. So last year, it sort of felt like there was a lot of breakthroughs in 2023. Last year, it sort of couldn't really make a lot of progress, I felt. I don't know how you felt
and
about
we
that.
had the CAS review released on April 10.
Well, yes.
I thought that was going to be the solution to all my problems, and actually it was quite devastating to realise that Australia was going to ignore that.
Yes, I felt the same. Like, we were very excited when we watched, briefings live, and we analysed it as soon as it came out, and then it was just ignored by Australia, basically. And I felt the same. I felt quite devastated. But more recently, we've had some. I'll go through them one by one, but we've had a series of different things happen. And the very first thing that happened, even before the United States, was Queensland announced some changes to what they're doing, specifically around puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for children. Now, part of that was related to some issues at a particular clinic, but part of it was around the medicine itself. Could you explain to people exactly what Queensland has announced and some of the problems that they thought led to this?
Yeah, well, it's been an amazing set of events. So about 3 weeks ago, there was an article in the Courier Mail which said that, with a quote from the Health Minister, stating that the new LNP government was going to continue with the implementation of the 25 recommendations from the inquiry that was held under the previous Labor government under Health Minister Shannon Sentiment. And that inquiry into the Queensland Children's Gender Service was a sham stacked by activists and ignored the CAS review. And they essentially recommended, 25 recommendations, most of them were focused on expanding gender-affirming care across the state. But they also had ridiculous things like a massive public education plan campaign to convince the public that they should affirm children, and measures to improve the morale in the clinic. Anyway, so that went into the newspaper on a Saturday morning. And then my understanding is that there was a massive outcry from LNP members and from the general public and from LNP members of Parliament, because I think there's quite a few LNP members of Parliament who understand the gender issue and are concerned about gender intervention. So that led to the changing of that article in the online edition of that article was changed by that afternoon, saying that they would consider each recommendation before implementation. But I think what's happened with that process was that the government realised that there's a lot of concern about this issue and that it's a vote winner to be strong on it, because they've been so concerned about appearing conservative. But I think they've figured out that they can act on this issue, this important issue, without appearing conservative because it's a mainstream issue. So then what happened, on the 28th of July, we had a front page article in the Courier Mail saying that there'd been a scandal at the Cairns Sexual Health Clinic, which is an adult clinic in Cairns. What they've been doing is treating children, 47 children, and they had 17 children on either puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. And that had come to light in May 2024 because a whistleblower had submitted a public interest disclosure. And I don't know the whistleblower, but goodness, I'd love to meet them. So that went onto the front page, and they said that they were going to have an inquiry into the Cairns, or they had started an inquiry into the Cairns clinic.
Just back up a minute. So this clinic is meant to be adults only, and yet it was treating children and giving them these drugs to minors, obviously, if they're puberty blockers. Yes, and there was also complexity not explained in the article, but somehow the kids were being given these, or some of the kids were being given these medicines without parental consent as well, and without the usual, fertility counselling and all that is recommended by the so-called Australian Standards of Care. Which is shocking, really. Because they're meant to have at least parental consent, right? So,
yes. And when we read that article about the Cairns clinic, what was being said was the concern was that it wasn't following the Australian standards, and so that wasn't something that I thought would lead to a lot of change, because it was still suggesting that the Australian standards were adequate, which of course they're not. But so by that day that article was published in the Courier Mail, then by about lunchtime, Queensland Health had released a memo, a directive, that they were ceasing the prescription of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to minors pending an inquiry, statewide inquiry of Gender Services. And I couldn't believe my eyes, but it's the most wonderful news. So that all happened in one day. And yes, it was wonderful.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when I saw that as well. I couldn't believe it when I read the media release. I saw you posted it and I was like, oh my God, is this real? And then I went and checked Queensland Health's website and yep, it's real. It's a real thing that happened. Now, following on from that, we also had very soon after, there was a letter that was signed by 100 different Australians. You and I were both signatories to that letter that was sent to the Prime Minister. And then very shortly after that, the federal government came out with their announcement of what they wanted to do on this issue. Now, I was very happy that at least they were sort of taking notice of something at least, but there was a lot of people that, I'm guessing yourself as well, were quite skeptical about the motivations and stuff here. Let's talk a bit about what the federal government was proposing and what the way they dealt with the Queensland government.
Yes. So the federal government, after years of trying to get them to do something, years and years, more than 5 years, at this juncture, they've decided to do something, and they say that they have decided to do something because they're asked by the transgender activist organisation OzPath to do something. And what they're doing is to get the NHMRC to provide clinical guidelines on the care of children presenting with gender distress. So the NHMRC has their own standards for guidelines, and I assume that they will be followed, which is about transparency and the management of conflict of interest and linking recommendations to an assessment of the strength of the evidence underpinning each recommendation. But unfortunately, the territory we're in is that we have seen institution after medical college all fail in terms of their integrity on this issue. So I think we're all in the dark as to whether the NHMRC is able to provide an independent guideline on this topic. But what's most concerning is the 18-month time frame. I just can't see any reason for it to take that long. And that's actually just an 18-month time frame to receive an interim update on puberty blockers. And we've had 5 years of systematic reviews telling us that there's a lack of evidence of benefit for puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. So there's no reason to be waiting that long. It could take a senior, researcher a week to realise that that is the evidence and that's so therefore they can't be recommended outside of a clinical trial. So the time frame just seems to be Mark Butler kicking the can a very long way down the road for political purposes.
And the thing that made me skeptical about whether they were serious about this was, yes, the 18-month time frame, but also during that period, they're not sort of stopping any of these treatments.
Yes.
If you had a medical treatment that you suspect is not effective or doesn't promise the effectiveness that it claims, that may cause a whole range of harms that have been outlined, such as sexual dysfunction, infertility.
Yes.
There's concerns about brain development, bone development, a
Very serious concerns. Yes.
whole raft of concerns, and yet you just say, well, we're just going to keep continuing giving these kids these drugs for the next 18 months and we'll wait and see if it's safe after that. And I was like, are you guys serious? At least Queensland took it seriously and they said, no, we're going to stop it now and then we'll review it, because it doesn't seem like they're taking it seriously. Can you imagine any other situation where they were concerned about something harming children and then they just decided to continue it for another 18 months? Just until they can find out if it's actually harming or not. I mean, right?
It's medico-legally defensible. I assume we'll have to have some sort of statutory body set up as for compensation for the transitioners. Yeah, it's a scandal too. That is part of an evolving scandal of gender affirming care and minus. Yes, that the government's taking it seriously.
And so we've also had something that's happened internationally. So there's been a bunch of things happen internationally. So many countries now have either stopped or are rethinking these treatments. So the United Kingdom now, many other European countries, but most notably quite recently, the United States federal government issued a federal directive basically knocking these treatments on the head at a federal funding level. Tell us a bit about what's happened there.
Yeah, well, my understanding is that federal funding has been removed for anything to do with childhood gender transition. My understanding is that their definition goes up to including 18, so to the age of 19. And then what I gather is that hospitals that even have previously said that they weren't conducting surgeries on children and all sorts of things are now announcing that they're not doing it anymore. So it seems to be having quite an effect. And it's such a relief to have people in charge who understand the gravity of what's happened in pulling back on funding for gender interventions, but also their cultural attempts for change. So the removal of pronouns from people's email signatures in government departments, etc., is incredibly important. I haven't obviously worked at the hospital for 21 months, but the 18 months before I left, or I was pushed to leave, was so oppressive. The environment of all the transgender flags around me, all the rainbow lanyards and pronoun and ally badges and the pronouns in the signature, it just creates this terrible, oppressive and depressing environment where if you don't agree with it, you feel so marginalised. And actually, I have some Human Rights Commission complaint that's going up to the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission, and that's to try and get a decision that people can't be discriminated at work for believing that people can't change sex. So I'm hopeful that might make a difference here.
Okay. And something else that's happened recently, you've announced your candidacy for Australia's peak psychiatry body to be the president of that.
Yes.
Tell us what's happened there and what sort of reaction you've had there.
Yeah, so I'm nominated to be president-elect, which runs for 2 years, and then you roll on to being president for 2 years after that. And yes, every 2 years the nomination process happens, and it came up, and I've never been involved with the college before, so it wasn't something that I would naturally think to do. But the problem we've been facing for a long time now is that the college has been captured by political causes, particularly things like climate change, overseas wars, obviously this gender issue they're very affirming, and asylum seeker and refugee and immigration policy. So they have all these political views that don't represent their membership and actually aren't core issues for psychiatry. I don't believe that psychiatry, apart from the gender issue, I don't believe that psychiatrists have any greater knowledge than other citizens about how these policy settings should go. And I think it's important that we don't pretend to. So, so it is about gender medicine for me, running for president-elect, but it's also this broader issue within the college of this politicisation that doesn't represent the membership and shouldn't be part of what psychiatry does. We just need to get back to basics, focusing on really good scientific mental health services and scientific progress. I feel like in Australia we need some, I mean, maybe it is the NH and MRC, I don't know, but we just need somebody that we can really trust, a body, an institution that we can really trust scientifically. I think they do have that in the UK with the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence. So, so I need to make our discipline more scientific.
That's a really good point. Look, thank you so much for catching up with me. I know you're very busy at the moment with everything that you're doing. And look, best of luck for the future. We'll be watching very closely in Queensland on what happens with the review there. And of course, I'll keep, with others, keep pushing in Victoria to do something like that here. We'll see. We've got Parliament this week. But and best of luck for your candidacy for president.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for everything that you're doing and your support too. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.